The Evangelion Rebuild films are basically just Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. The Eva Rebuild films and Let's Go both set out to use pre-existing large media properties and simplify their core appeal for a broader audience. Since I happen to be a huge fan of both of these media properties, I want to compare the approaches they take when doing this and ultimately explain why I think Let's Go succeeds at this and the Eva Rebuild sort of fail at this. Pokemon Let's Go Eevee and Let's Go Pikachu sought out to simplify the gameplay of the main Pokemon games in a way that would appeal to the more casual Pokemon playing audience that formed around Pokemon Go's release. A lot of the gameplay elements in Let's Go mimic those of Pokemon Go in certain ways, such as the catching system and the idea of seeing wild Pokemon on the game map, as well as just making the game more casual in terms of combat scenarios. These three things are important in making this game incentivize catching Pokemon over everything else, which is the game's core appeal. The Pokemon Let's Go catching system makes catching Pokemon simple and quick. Removing the requirement of Pokemon battling in order to catch them was also a great effort in encouraging catching a lot of the same Pokemon over and over again. Since you now see the Pokemon on the overworld map, it makes it so that you have to choose to want to catch them, as opposed to being bothered with random encounters over and over. I think Let's Go did a great job of doing what it set out to do as a game, and as a longtime fan of the main Pokemon series, I was able to enjoy it because of the new gameplay changes it brought to the table. Catching Pokemon has always been one of my favorite aspects of Pokemon, so playing a game that has that as the focus was refreshing to me. The aspects of the main game series that were lost in the game were the more advanced battling mechanics, breeding, more online features, and holding items on Pokemon. Losing these things wasn't that big of a deal though, since what I enjoy about these games is catching all the Pokemon first and foremost. The reason I think the Evangelion Rebuild films sort of fail though as entries in the Eva franchise is that, unlike with Pokemon Let's Go, the things that were lost in simplifying the formula were way more important to what I feel is the core appeal of Evangelion, which is the characters. To clarify, the Evangelion Rebuild films are a series of films that remake the 26 episode Neon Genesis Evangelion TV series. The films cover most of the main plot points of the series in a fairly surface level way, without going into a lot more of the complex character relationships or developments that the TV series goes into. Characters like Asuka, Misato, and Ritsuko are great examples of characters that just go nowhere in the Rebuild films. Their tragic backstories are just brushed over, or in Ritsuko's case, aren't explored at all really. Now despite this, I think the first two Rebuild films work fairly well as movies. They're paced well, directed well, they make sense, and they have beautiful visuals and music. While they are lacking in depth, I think they are a great way to introduce newer anime fans into the Evangelion franchise. But they fail for me as a simplification of the show because they don't focus on what I think is the core appeal of what Evangelion is, which is the characters. And the third Evangelion Rebuild film is where everything really falls apart. The third Evangelion Rebuild film changes the plot of the series drastically by having a 14-year time skip after the ending of the second film. This time skip makes certain characters completely change, like Ritsuko and Misato, for example. The film's focus becomes less about main character Shinji Ikari's struggles to communicate and relate to those around him, and more about the sci-fi elements of the series and what has happened to Earth after a huge disaster. The core appeal of what Evangelion to me is how each of the characters are flawed and fleshed out, and how they struggle to communicate and properly function. This is especially apparent with Shinji. He's the central focus of the TV series, and everything that happens in the story serves to further his development as a character. The problem with the third Rebuild film is that it turns Shinji into a fish out of water character, having him awaken out of a 14-year stasis and having him discover what has happened to Earth around him and what has changed. This movie focuses more on using Shinji to explore the world rather than using the world to explore Shinji. That's all for this video though. If you like this video, consider subscribing and leaving a like on the video. I'll see you in the next one.